And happening right now, the Coalition to Defeat ISIS Summit is taking place over at the State Department, hosted by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He reiterated America's commitment to the region, specifically in Syria, citing that while the U.S. does intend to pull troops from the country, he said American presence will remain. Leaders from the 75-nation coalition and 4 international organizations gathered at the State Department for meetings with Pompeo. And fresh off the heels of his State of the Union address last night, President Trump is also expected to give remarks at the event later this afternoon. So joining us now to discuss, former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. All right, Mike, ahead of the State of the Union last night, though, the top U.S. commander of U.S. forces in the Mideast, General Joseph Votel, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that, quote, the fight against ISIS and violent extremists is not over and our mission has not changed. All right, this seems to be contrary to the president vowing to pull troops. Can you explain to us how these two statements can be true?
Well, they're obviously very compatible with one another. But Trump announced a policy. We're pulling the troops out. He didn't say when. We're hearing maybe 120 days. But the reality is that they're going to try to keep the troops there in Al Tanaf at a very critical strategic cross-section near Jordan, in order to try and stop the Iranians from coming through. And this is where I'm hearing that Americans will remain, notwithstanding the desire by Trump to remove them from Syria and maybe transfer them to Iraq, which is going to create a whole nother level of problems because the Iraqis haven't allowed it so far. Okay, so I'm glad you brought up Iran. I mean, if the move to Al Tanf by the air base is to blunt Iranian troops, Pompeo also mentioned that part of the U.S. commitment in Syria would also hinge on the removal of, he says, every single Iranian boot from the ground. Can this actually happen? I mean, under what circumstances would Assad ever ask Iran to leave? They've helped him. They're not going to. And this is one more example of neocon killer amendments, killer conditions meant to absolutely undercut whatever the president said. We saw this right after the JCPOA withdrawal, in which the president said, I'm willing to meet with leaders unconditionally of Iran. And within an hour, Pompeo came up with a list of 12 conditions, which were not meant to be enforceable at all. So is it a dog and pony show? Well, it shows who's really in charge of foreign policy here. It's not Trump. Really? It's Bolton and Pompeo. I know this comes as a big surprise, but this is the reality of what's happening. This is the neocon agenda, and it's going to get us into a lot of serious trouble again. And we're seeing this now as they do this coalition thing that's now going on in Washington to develop some. I mean, when you have countries like Fiji, how serious is that? You know. That's a good point. Fiji just added to the coalition group to defeat ISIS. 75, yeah, it's going to defeat ISIS for us. So it looks like they're trying to help the U.S. defeat ISIS in the Middle East in one way or another. That'll work. Let's move over now to Moscow, where Afghan senior leaders and the Taliban are in their final day of talks there. We know the official Afghani government is not there, but ghosts from the past, such as Hamid Karzai, are there. And, of course, it's being hosted by the Russians. So with that in mind, how might this influence the peace talks between the Afghani circle there? I mean, you've got Hamid Karzai from way back when, and the Russians. I think it's going to have very little effect. I think what Moscow was doing was bringing together intra-Afghani elements, such as the tribal clansmen and leaders, but also for Moscow itself to remain relevant in this entire process, because Afghanistan is right in its backyard. U.S., he doesn't want, President Putin doesn't want the United States to be taking the lead on this and trying to reassert its influence, and which also means it's going to try and keep out Iran. So the Taliban, as I said the other day, the Taliban and U.S. discussions are negotiating on what to negotiate about. That's where they are right now. They haven't agreed on anything. And what Khalilzad, the U.S. negotiator, wants them to do is talk to the Afghan government. They don't want to do that. The Taliban. The Taliban, yeah. We're beginning to get a sense that the Taliban has agreed to moderate its position on women, which is very, very important. Are they looking to come back mainstream and be the political
bosses now and be less of
Oh, I think so, because they really regard the current Kabul government as a U.S. puppet. They want it out. They're just going to wait it out. And the U.S. is showing a level of determination to try to looking for an exit strategy as quickly as possible, leaving whatever debris and there can be in the wake of their departure, and they don't really care ultimately what comes about.
What comes next?
That's correct, and that's what's happening here.
We got to get out and save face. It sounds like
that's basically it.
All right, thank you as always for letting us pick your brain today, Michael Maloof.
Right, sure.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.